All right, here we go. Hold your ears, folks. It's showtime.
Live from Joe's mom's basement, it's the Stacking Benjamin Show. I'm Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug. On today's roundtable, ever read the book Die with Zero? If not, let me summarize it for you. The book's about dying with zero. Weird, right? We'll tackle some lessons from that book on today's episode. Why would you want to die with nothing? To help us, we welcome back the woman behind The Milmo Show, Lacey Langford. And the man who, according to a new business news piece, may die with a lot more than zero unless he gets crack-a-lackin', it's Doc G. And finally, the guy who's worked hard to die with zero, but he just continues to find a way to flourish, it's OG. But this crew won't just share wisdom around dying broke. Halfway through the show, they'll compete for the big prize of winning my inherited trivia question. And now a guy whose childhood home is now a tourist attraction about the pioneer days, it's Joe Saul-Sehy.
Hey there, Stackers. Welcome to the I Need to Preview the Scripts Before Doug Reads Them podcast. I'm Joe Saul-Sehy, Average Joe Money, and it's Friday. So kick your feet up because you know what that means. We're going to have a fantastic money chat about one of our favorite pieces that a popular blogger created. And before we get to the piece, well, the piece is about a book called Die with Zero. And you know what? We will link to our discussion with the author of that book, Bill Perkins, in the show notes at Stacking Benjamins. You won't need it for this episode, but if you want to dive more into the book, we'll make that available for you. But let's start off with a guy across the card table. Mr. OG's here. OG, did you read Die with Zero?
I did. Yes.
Fine book. Would you call that a good weekend read for people that are thinking about starting it now?
My mom said, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all.
Oh, so you weren't a fan of the book?
I was not a fan.
That'll be interesting. We can get into that later. The gentleman who is from our brother podcast, Mr. Doc G, is back.
Mr. Business Insider.
How about that?
What can I say? I have a book to promote.
I'm kind of a big deal. My home smells of rich mahogany.
You certainly made a splash. And for people that don't know what we're talking about, we'll link to the article about Doc G in the show notes as well. But basically talks about your net worth, but not really about your net worth. I mean, it truly is about purpose, Doc.
Yeah, I mean, it's about the FIRE community and this idea of what getting to financial independence buys us. And that's really a big question. I think it's a big question we're going to talk about today with Die Zero is you're saving up all this money. What are you going to actually do with it? And will it bring you some sense of happiness, peace, fulfillment?
So, Doc, are you on Team OG or Team Joe? I like the book. I thought the book was great.
So I am definitely Team OG here. I think the book misses the point.
Wow. Oh, this is going to be great. And joining us to save the day, Lacey Langford from the Mill Money Show's back. How are you?
I'm doing good. I see you guys wanted to talk about death and you thought, who could we bring on to discuss death?
We're going to talk about more living, Lacey. We think about more living. We think about Lacey Langford.
Well, that's good to know. I'm really excited that you guys broke down the book for me because I have not read it, but now I'm inclined not to read it.
Oof.
But so you're not Team Joe either. You haven't even read it. You're not even on Team Joe.
Well, I have my own thoughts about Die with Zero. I think I was kind of raised that way, so I might already be in that realm.
Well, speaking of teaching, you're raising a bunch of people to be better with their money on the Milmo Show. So I like the Milmo Show. What's tell everybody what you do on the show? Because you have just a slight bit of fun.
Yes. It's all about helping the military community make, save, and invest money wisely. Personal finance and entrepreneurship. And I do like to have a little personality when it comes to money.
Slightly.
Just a scooch, and make it approachable and be authentic in in that whole conversation about money, especially in the military community. We like to have a sense of humor and not be a wet blanket. So, but yeah, it's really helping people be better with their money.
Unlike Doug.
Yeah, Doug.
Yeah, Doug.
Speaking of wet blankets.
You know, you and your husband both, Lacey, have a military background. You were Air Force and he was Army?
Yes. Well, he was Air Force and Army, which is a really weird combo. He was Air Force, then went into the Army. That's really strange. But yes, he has 2 services, but Air Force is the best force.
Decided Air Force was too tough and he had to go to something easier. Because I know that among military service members, Air Force is known as the toughest.
Yes. Yes, it is. It really is. My basic training, I think, was leaps and bounds harder than OG's.
Agreed.
A friend of the show, Dan Hine, had showed a video on social media this last week. He's one of the organizers of our meetup group in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And Dan was showing the difference when people report for basic training in the Air Force versus when people report for basic training in the Marines. And let's just say they were slightly different experiences.
Was there smoke grenades?
It may have been a little bit more difficult in the Marines. We got a great show though. And by the way, thank you for your service, Lacey. And I'm super happy that you're in service working with us today. I don't know.
This is a service. You're right. I am doing a service.
She's helping make the show go. You know what also makes the show go, Lacey?
No, I have no idea.
It's the fact that this episode, like every Friday episode, brought to you by State Farm. State Farm is there. Talk to your local agent today. Big thanks to State Farm. And they're not the only sponsor that we have that makes our Friday show go. We have a few more. We'll play some of them midway through the trivia, but here is one more that we need to thank so we can keep the show free for you. Lacey Langford's here. Doc G, OG, Neighbor Doug, and me. Let's get this party started. All right, today we are taking our cue from a blog post from one of my favorite blogs. Darrow and Chris do such a great job with this blog. It's called Can I Retire Yet? CanIRetireYet.com. And our friend Chris Mamula, who's been on the show a few times, wrote this piece. And it is called Summer Travels, Applying Lessons from Die With Zero. Now, the good news, stackers, you don't need to read this piece, but we will link to it because it's great on our show notes at stackingbenjamins.com. But Doc, let's start with you because Chris makes a couple big points here. The first one is about time buckets. And this is one of the 2 big points that Bill Perkins makes in the book Die With Zero. Can you explain what time bucketing means?
You know, I think the concept is that we have these things, these experiences that we want to be part of our lives, but there are better times and worse times to do this, right? So when you're in college or just getting done with college, it's a great time to go backpacking in Europe. Whereas when you're 80 and using a walker, it's probably not as good of a time. So this idea of saving up your money till the one day when you can do all these things doesn't necessarily match the temporal reality of we either have more time, more energy, or more physical ability at different times of our lives. And if we're just continuously saving and not spending, we're going to miss some of these seasons in our lives where it's more appropriate to do these things. So things like avid travel, we don't want to wait till we're too old to do those kind of things, even if we are not financially independent or aren't even as financially stable as we want to be. The argument is maybe we should be spending sooner at the right times in our lives.
Well, and it's funny, Doc, because that was the big message that I got from this book. So, and I think you're on board with that, right? Of this idea of balance. You certainly talk about, and I feel like, I don't know, there have been some things in my life that I miss and I realize that I'll never do because I didn't take advantage of it. I was either too afraid or being too conservative, whatever it might be, to do it at the time. You definitely don't disagree with this idea of time bucketing, do you?
Well, not particularly. I mean, obviously, when it comes to Doc's example of backpacking through Europe, you know, in that extreme example of of, when you're 20 versus when you're 80. Obviously, that's going to be profoundly different. In fact, one of the struggles that I have with the overall kind of FIRE idea of work really hard and just, save a boatload of money and don't do anything is the fact that you're not doing anything. And then, or you do something and think that's how it's going to be the rest of your life. I mean, very, very personally, I used to go backpacking and camping outside and sleeping, in the woods and eat out of my hat, both for work and also for fun. And I would never do that again like that. And I could totally see back in the, if this were something if I were introduced to the whole FIRE concept, when I was 22, I'd have been like, oh, this is perfect. Like I could totally do all of this. And then you go to like a Four Seasons one time and you're like, well, hold on.
Yeah. I remember OG. I remember Bill Perkins using that same example saying, you know what? I didn't backpack through Europe. My roommate did. I was too concerned about, making money. He goes, now I'm 55. I got more money than I could ever spend. And I look back at backpacking and think how cool that would have been. And I'm way too bougie now. He literally, that was, I think, a direct quote. He goes, I'm way too, there is no way in hell you're getting me in a backpack through Europe. Well, but that doesn't mean I don't miss it. He's like, I miss it.
Yeah. It's not the bouginess of it, although that's some of it now. It's more like when you're planning for the future. And this is one of the things that is a little different. I think when you're planning for the future and you assume the future is going to look a lot like the current does, when you go, for example, spending or whatever you enjoy, or whatever, and you're like, I'm going to spend $40,000 a year the rest of my life. I'm very comfortable with this, until you spend $80,000 one year and go, well, that also is comfortable. And it allows me different things. Well, by going from 40 to 80, I just changed my, FIRE number from $1 million to 2 million. You know what I mean? And so there's a lot of people who I think are, focused on like, this is how it is today. And therefore this is how it probably will be in the future, and not accounting for the variability. And maybe some of this is his point around the bucket things. But what I don't like about it necessarily is the fact that there is a lot of variability in lifespan and health span and these sorts of things. And there are lots of people, Doc knows, who are 70, who are very healthy and, move around well, and maybe not going to backpack, but certainly can do extended exercise or, whatever. And there's a lot of 30-year-olds who can't, so some of it, I mean, I get the idea of, tomorrow's not promised to everybody. So, don't wait for the end, basically. If that's the overarching, argument to the book, it's hard to argue with that. But I think there's little pieces of that's, that you have to consider. One of which is this variable, kind of health and lifespan, that goes across, different people's lives. It's gonna be different for me than you.
Yeah, I feel like the overarching feeling, Lacey, is this idea of living without regret. And I don't know if, like Bill and OG just brought up, that there are some things that, you're not going to do now that you would have done younger. Are there any things in that time bucket that you regret that you didn't do that you wish you would have done when you were younger?
I think being in the military was a huge benefit, and that's serious business. So there's a lot of perspective, I think. So there are things like I wish I would have traveled more, but then I did travel a lot. I think there's balance in everything. And I tried really hard not to go into debt when I was younger. And so that meant I missed out on some trips, but I did get to do some. So I didn't get to do everything I wanted to do, but there were things that I checked off, and, maybe some things got pushed down the road, but I'm still able to do a lot of those things. So I think there's yin and yang in everything. Like you're going to give a little and miss out on some things, but in the long run, like you can still do those. And I think, life is very humbling, especially in the military community. So there's people, that have tried to focus on, having roommates, house hacking, doing deployments, extra TDYs in order to save up money, but then they get injured, they get put out of the military. So, cancer, things like that, thinking in the future, again, I'll do these things, but now I don't have the capability of doing them. And so I think it really, everything you all said, that it is balanced, and you have to know what you value and what you want. Some people don't want to travel. That's not something they want to be with family. They enjoy local experiences. So I think the grass isn't always greener on the other side, and keeping up with what everybody else is doing is not a good way to have this, time buckets and balance getting to do all the things that you want in life.
No, definitely not. I remember I had a client that he traveled for work his entire career, and he had this goal. He wanted a garden. He wanted to spend as much time as he could at home doing just that, because he spent so much time in airports and so much time on the road, and he'd already thought he'd seen stuff. He really wanted the piece that was different. And I love this idea of it's not all the same, but I think there's some value in this, Lacey, then of maybe taking out a sheet of paper or a spreadsheet and going, okay, these are the things I'd like to do during this part of my life. And these are some things I'd like to do during this part. And these are some things I'd like to do during this part, kind of projecting forward. Have you thought about time bucketing for the future from here on out to get that balance?
Yes, absolutely. I think I had a very humbling life experience. I almost died in the pregnancy of my first son. And in that moment, it happened really quick. And they're like, hey, this isn't going well. We're going to, have to have this baby right now. And I thought, oh my gosh, like my son could not have a mom, grow up without a mom. But then after that gave me a lot of time to reflect on how I wanted us to live our life and have balance. Like both of us need to be very present for our children because something could happen to me. My husband obviously had a very serious business. So we did do a lot of reflection about like, how do we want to raise our children? What's most important to instill in them at this age and as they grow, and, what can they do without? And in our marriage with the kids, all of these things, there's different buckets, I think, that we laid out that we wanted to do. And it was more important in the beginning not to do as much traveling, much spending as it was to be fully present in their lives. With my husband being gone a lot, the close call that I had, that became our priority. So I think, again, it goes back to who you are, what you want. But if you don't make a plan for where you want to go, you're going to end up nowhere, and you are going to miss out on the things that you want. And you're going to look back and think, I wish I would have done better, or I wish I would have done different. But having a plan, just like anything with your money, planning your life, I think is really important, especially in a relationship when you both have things that you want to accomplish in life or things that you'd like to experience. And if you don't kind of get together and have that discussion, then you're going to be heading in different directions.
It's funny because, you could be planning for the future all the time, but I feel like when you and I talk, Lacey, I feel like there's many times we talk where you're either on your way to a kid's event or you're at a kid's event. and I feel like that's getting, is that what I'm thinking? It is I'm present right now for my kids thing. Yes,
that takes priority. Everything works around the kids and our relationship, my business, things will always have to be done and can easily seep into the time that we spend together. So it is a priority. Like the time is limited, how many summers I'll have with them, how many sports events I'll be able to attend. When they have a goal that they want to pursue, being able to start them on that path, doing the research, figuring out how to go after something that they want in life. So right now, like we're training them to be fully functioning adults and go on their way. And if I'm not present, I'm going to miss out on a lot of that. And then I'm going to have regret too, like when they have problems later that, hey, that was a lesson that I missed out on because I was doing something else, like, on a trip to Ibiza, like that, you're talking about time bucket, like that's not the one I should have done when I had kids. It would be before or after kids. So I get like that planning, but yeah, that's our goals.
Well, yeah, but the helping your kids would be fully functioning adults also can be interpreted as very selfish, so that you don't have a 40-year-old still living at home. You're like, hey, this is a more selfish goal than you know.
I'm trying so hard. But go be free. Go be free.
Go. Doc, this feels like purpose to me, taking out the sheet and going, I want to do this. I want this bucket. I want this bucket. I want this bucket. It feels so much like purpose. I think this is probably the wellspring where all purpose comes from.
It feels nothing like purpose. And here's why. So there is a continuum of what I would call cheap thrills to deep and utter happiness, right? And so on one side you have cheap thrills, and on the other side you have kind of that deep, fuller happiness. We know that right in the cheap thrills place is the like blow money on something short term and not be any happier a few days later, right? So that's the hedonic treadmill. We all know about that. I think we think the antidote to that is experiences, and I think that's guff. I mean, I think experiences are great, but then they come and go and they're gone. I think true enduring happiness actually comes from being the person you want to be. And you can't buy your way to that. Money has nothing to do with that. It's a tool. It's nice to have the money. But when people die or on their deathbed, most of the time it's, I didn't take that trip to Italy. It's, I regret I wasn't the kind of person who took more trips and did more things. When you're on your deathbed, you don't say, I really regret that I didn't take my kid to Europe. You say, I regret I wasn't the kind of person who spent more time with my kids and was more a part of their life and had more adventures with them. I just think those things don't cost money. I think what really makes you happy isn't things and it isn't experiences. It's pursuing what lights you up and bringing that into the world and connecting to other people. And you don't need money to do that. So, you know, he could have traveled, like Bill Perkins could have traveled to Europe when he was in college, and he really missed out on that. But you can go backpack around Chicago when you live there and experience a lot of amazing things and do cool stuff and meet cool people. And you become that kind of person, whether you spend the money on going to Europe or not. Money's a great tool. It's fine. You can do some really cool things with money. But I think if you're really looking for happiness, it's not how much money you spent when you die, and it's not how much money you have in your bank account when you die. It's who you became and those people you touched. And I just think money has very little to do with that in the end.
You know, backpacking around Chicago, they've got some great campsites like under the overpasses and then down by the river near the Willis Tower. It's a great, I agree, great place to backpack. They give out free tents too.
The architectural tour. Yeah, a whole different tour. You know, when Bill's talking about this, then are you saying then, Doc, that he misses a point, or is this just something different? Because do you think there's something wrong then with bucketing out your usage of your dollars?
Not with bucketing out, but I think there's something wrong with saying spend your money and that's going to lead to happiness. And so what he's pretty much saying is spend your money and pursue great experiences. And while I think that's jolly and wonderful and may bring you a modicum of happiness, I don't think it's going to give you truer and deeper happiness. So I think bucketing is fine. I just think it's beside the point. I think if you're really looking for what he's describing in this book, like to do it right, it's not to die with zero and it's not to die with 10 million. It's irrelevant. It's becoming the person you want to be and allowing your money to be a tool to help, but that's it. Nothing more, nothing less. The stakes are much lower is what I'm saying.
I never thought of this as purpose. I thought of it more as, is this what money, what the hell else are you going to do with your money?
I think money does lots of great things for you. I think it's a great tool to basically allow you to live a life full of purpose and things you want to do. I think it's one of many tools. So if that allows you to pay people to do things that you don't have to do, great. If it allows you to retire early because you don't like your job, great. But it's not either or. It's just one of many tools. If you happen to have some of that tool, wonderful, use it. If you don't have that tool, use your other tools.
Oh, gee, when it comes to this idea of bucketing, I mean, you're right in the middle of this with your kids at the ages that they're at. You're losing one from home this year. You're going to lose another one in a couple of years. This idea of bucketing's got to be on your mind now, I would think.
Well, in another year, Alex is a senior, so I've got a year to go. I wouldn't say I'm losing him. It's more of like I'm preparing him to be a fully functioning adult.
I think somebody else might have said that before you.
Is that your big takeaway?
That's I already claimed it. Yep. Big takeaway. Fully functioning adult. So I think that there's a lot around different season of spending and being okay. I think a lot of people will wait too long. I've certainly been on record a million times of saying, what's the point of having 10 million in the bank and have never taken your kids or grandkids to Disney? Everybody knows Disney is a gigantic waste of money. It's so expensive. It's insane, but it's very awesome every so often. Some people like going a lot. I can go once every couple of years, but it's really cool every time we go. And, so I kind of put that as like Doc was saying around, it's not about the fact that we were at Disney. It's the fact that the kids were having a ton of fun, or we did it with grandma and grandpa and they had a ton of fun with their grandkids. And, you know, we were able to make all that happen. So money made that happen, you know, but I think that there's different seasons of the spending that you can do. But I'm also concerned about looking at it from the perspective of like, well, I got to get all the fun stuff done by the time I'm 50. I'll be too old, like Joe. You know,
Life's over.
That's it. We're done.
It's like, and scene. You know, it's like because as Joe has proven, there is life after 50. I mean, who knew? But I mean, I can't predict what 60 looks like, honestly. But can you imagine? You're on the doorstep.
It looks a lot
of
like
that,
Joe,
brother.
actually.
That's right. You're not wrong.
Sitting right here.
Let me put.
Is there a way to mute a mic or two?
No, I was just, you know, I'm just saying, like, if you put too much emphasis on like YOLO, this is how I read this, and maybe it's incorrect, but I read this as like YOLO. You know, it's like you gotta do all this stuff now because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Well, guess what? There's a really good chance you might live to be 90 tomorrow, you know, this in your life, or your kids live to be 90 or 100 or you know, whatever. And you have all this opportunity. Don't squander that at the expense of, like Doc was saying, oh, I got to go have experiences. It's like, well, recognize that one of the opportunities you have is you've got, you know, maybe 50 accumulation years in your life. Like, do some accumulation and then let that stuff compound for a while and see what you can do with it on the back end of donating to the things that you care about or improving the lives of the people around you or whatever. Because, you know, if there's one common thread around, you know, long-term wealth, it's that it didn't show up. It took a while to get there. Now, how you train people and teach people to not screw it up in the second generation or whatever, I don't know anybody's got the answer to that yet, but at least I can do my part and not be like the grandpa that's like, oh, well, my grandpa made $50 million when he was alive and God only knows what happened to him. We went on some cool trips with grandpa, but he didn't leave us anything, you know?
Yeah. I mean, to put a kind of a fine point on it, I'll use my parents as an example. Like, my parents accumulated a decent amount of wealth, and you could kind of look at the Bill Perkins ethos and say they could have bucketed better. They could have spent a lot more. They don't need as much as they have now. But they had no idea that when they would get to this part of life, they decided to live in an independent living community that ended up costing a huge amount of money that they didn't plan for, but they happened to have it. And they're living their best lives now. But they wouldn't have known that. And so the point is, so, you know, rush after these experiences when you're young, really drain the money because that's great. And you want to make sure you use it in the right seasons. They had no clue that in this season of their life, having that extra money, they're happier than I've ever seen them in, you know, my 50 years of existence. My parents are happiest today because they moved to this community. They have all sorts of new connections and friends. It's expensive as all get out.
It's because they had the foresight, you know, luck, whatever it was, to just
that has a lot to
we
do
should
with
hang on
money.
to some of this. We should hang on to
But
some
they
of
had no
this.
idea.
But yeah,
they
didn't
had
know the
no
outcome.
idea that was going to be their want and need at that age.
No, of course not.
And they value that probably more than if they had gone backpacking in college. Like, what they're getting today, something they had no idea that they would even need or want. Like, it's really hard to forecast what you're going to want when, and then try to drain the bank account appropriately when you don't even know what you're going to want in 20 years
Yeah,
or 30
especially
years.
when you don't even know it exists. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that does have to do with money then, Doc. You said earlier that doesn't have to do with money. It's a hell of a lot to do with money.
I think the money, again, is a tool that allows them to be the people they want to be, which is these community members. They're active. They're doing things with friends. They're pursuing purpose. Could they have done it without the money? Certainly. It would just look different.
Yeah. Lacey?
I think it is about money. But more, I think the article, I hear all of what you guys are saying, but for me, the article is more about conversations. Like, this guy, he was trying to have a conversation with his dad on things that they had never really discussed or didn't discuss to the point that it needed to be. And for me, in my moment, I know I was younger, but like thinking I might die, I wasn't thinking about like who I was or whatever. I actually in that moment was thinking there was a lot of things that I didn't say. That was the only thing I cared about. Like, I forgot to tell somebody this, or I didn't tell my husband how I wanted my kids raised, or whatever it was. So for me, this is really about conversations about potentials, because you can never plan everything, but you should start having, we call it wargaming. Like, okay, if it goes this way, what are we going to do? If it goes this way, what are we going to do? So I think it's really that simple. It's just having conversations with people.
Imagine a military family would call it wargaming. That's so strange that they would do that.
Red team. Who's the red team? I got blue team.
And I love that, Lacey, because that's a nice handoff to the second idea, which is in this book and in this piece by Chris Mamula, is this idea about gifting during your lifetime, which brings up the idea of these conversations. I want to spend the second F on that. And before we get there, though, we have at the halfway point of every Friday show, our Friday trivia challenge. And man, Doug, do we got a barn burner going, because while OG has 11, Lacey, we got some good news and probably more good news for you. You want the good news or more good news?
I'll take the basic good news.
The basic good news is we'll have you, just to keep to make this easy, we'll have you play on behalf of Paula Pant today. And Paula generally is in last place. Paula actually moved into a tie. So while OG has 11, she has 7, and Mom also has 7. Doc, you'll play for Mom today, and Mom can't be bothered with doing trivia or coming down the stairs. So it's 11-7 is our score here. Are we going to see somebody finally move up toward OG, or are we going to see OG pull further ahead? We're about to find out.
So, Joe, does that mean that Lacey Paula is going to go second or third?
No, because they finished last year, she still gets to guess third.
Okay.
So we'll have OG goes first, Jordan/Mom goes second, and Lacey/Paula goes last. We need a trivia question, though, Doug. What do we got on tap today?
I happen to have one right here. Hey there, stackers. I'm Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug. On this day in 1977, the king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley, died of a heart attack at his Graceland estate in Memphis.
Where was he when he died?
He was taking care of some business.
Yes. Anyway, sorry.
Is how they say it?
Yes.
While the king's death shocked the world, it didn't shock his cardiologist. After all, it's well known that his favorite sandwich was peanut butter, banana, and bacon. That may sound good to you because it's amazing, but as an athlete, I know you got to have a vegetable once in a while, and no OG, not one that's deep fried. Even though I eat much healthier than the king did, I've embodied Elvis's spirit at different times in my life. One of my nicknames in high school was the Marching Band King. I think the ladies saw me as kind of a local Elvis, so I certainly had the striking good looks to fit the title, especially with the way I shook my hips when I played the flute. You never saw anybody play the flute the way I did. 5 years after his death, Elvis's widow, Priscilla, by then finally an adult, opened up her late husband's beloved Graceland to public tours to help cover the maintenance costs. Today's trivia question is, how much was the Hunka Hunka Burnin' estate tax that was paid by Lisa Marie Presley when she inherited her father's wealth? I'll be back right after I find my box of bedazzled jumpsuits. They're around here somewhere.
There it is. Lisa Marie Presley with the big estate tax. On Wednesday, we did a whole estate planning show. Go back and listen to that with the amazing attorney Tim Semro. Great episode on Wednesday to get your estate planning done. But OG, you're first. How much estate tax did Lisa Marie Presley pay?
All right, so this is going to be Elvis's estate value times the tax rate of estate tax, the federal estate tax. I guess we're not
federal.
We're not gonna
Yes,
counting any local or municipality taxes of any kind.
Just federal.
Well, it used to be very high. And he died in when? This was on the thing, 19 and
you weren't listening at all, were you? 1977.
1977. Oh,
yeah.
Wow, that's a cool year. So let's see here. So 70 and 7, his estate was probably worth infinity. I'm going to say that the estate tax bill was $14.8 million.
14.8 million with an M dollars. Doc, you went, Does that mean you think it's too high or too low?
I think it's too high. I don't know why. I don't know how much he spent, so I don't know how much he had left. And then I have no idea what the state tax rates were. I'm because I don't know how to play this depending on what Lacey's going to say. So I think it's less. But the question is how much less? I'm going to say I'm going to say $5 million.
$5 million. Well, that gives you a wide berth there, Lacey, between the two contestants. What are you thinking?
I think it's low because touring Graceland, all that money came after his death. So a lot of, I think, of his wealth was built up afterwards. I mean, I know he was holding it down before his death, but I think it's really low. So I'm going to go with my gut. I think it's $2 million.
$2 million. So you're going even lower.
I'm going way
this
low.
This is interesting. We've got $2 million from Lacey. We've got $5 million for Doc G. 14.8 million for OG. Way higher than the other two. We'll see in just a minute. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors that make this show go. OG opened this up with 14.8 million. Doc G and Lacey both think that you are way high. What are you thinking? Feeling good?
Well, it just depends. I mean, I know the estate tax was very high, a long time ago, 50, 60, 70%, maybe even higher. And the question is the value of it and the exemption amount. So it's only 13. I say only 13. It's only 13 million now. So what was it 50 years ago? I mean, way less. So a lot of it was subject to estate tax. The question is just how much did he have? That dude made some records. So I don't know. I mean, if his estate was worth $50 million, I mean, he could have paid $25 million in estate taxes. I don't know. We'll see.
Doc, sounds like your conundrum right there. That's what you were worried about. You don't know what the estate tax was, how much money you had.
I have no idea. For some reason, I thought it was going to be low because I was thinking like Lacey that a lot of the money has been made since. And he lived a fairly lavish lifestyle, right? So a lot of people spend down. We think that they make lots of money, but they spend tons and tons of money.
He was on his way to dying broke.
Yeah, exactly. He was going to die with zero. So I think I'm more confident with Lacey's number, but my confidence might push you more to thinking OG's right.
Oh, well, Lacey, Doc thinks you might be right. What are you thinking?
I'm just really hoping I win for Paula. That's what I'm really hoping for.
She's a giver. Lacey is a giver. Yes.
No, it could go either way. Like, I have no idea how much the value of this estate was. And if it was much higher, I could be way off. So now you guys have me second guessing myself, but I'm going to be confident about it. And I think I'm right.
Lacey, there's nothing more profound that's been said today than it could go either way. Like, that feels like the team that scores the most touchdowns is going to win the football game. Doug.
Here's a guy.
Is Lacey going to win? Here's
a guy. When he moves his legs faster, he runs.
Right. Who's got this?
Oh, it's awesome. Hey there, stackers. I'm self-taught nutritionist and guy who looks exquisite in a jumpsuit, Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug. Although it's been nearly 50 years since his untimely death, he's always on my mind. The memory of Elvis Presley endures around the world thanks in part to his home-turned-tourist attraction, the original Graceland. Today's trivia question is, how much was the estate tax paid by Lisa Marie Presley when she inherited her father's wealth? Enjoying over 600,000 visitors each year, Graceland is said to bring in an estimated $150 million a year in tourism revenue alone. That doesn't include the estate's other streams of income, such as music royalties. That works out to a pretty good living for his granddaughter, Riley Keough, who's the current sole owner of his estate. All my grandpa left me was his watch that he smuggled over to the U.S. hidden in his... You know what? Let's get back to the answers. OG was over by just 4.8 million. Doc G was under by 5. Lacey Paula was under by 8 because when the king of rock and roll died at the age of 42, his daughter, Lisa Marie, paid $10 million of estate tax when she inherited Graceland, which means OG is the winner again.
I hit the wrong button. There's the button. Have people laughing because OG won again. Oh my goodness! You guys let him pull further ahead. Nice job,
I tried.
OG.
It was a valiant effort by me. I was closer than usual.
Close. I wish you would have said 6. If you would have only said 6 instead of 5. Nice job. Only missed it by 0.2. OG, acceptance speech time.
Nope, I'm good.
All right. Well,
pretty soon we'll be dormy. It's hard to call that in August, but we'll see.
We're
unstoppable.
We're hearing, man, it's getting that distance is getting wide. Somebody needs to go on a 5-week streak just to tie you. But we've seen weird things happen when it comes to the trivia, especially in the fall. Let's do the second half of this podcast. The second half is brought to you by depositaccounts.com. Doc, you know what happens when you go to depositaccounts.com?
You find something out about brick and mortar institutions you didn't know.
You do, and that's that they may not have your best interest rate at heart. Compare more than 275,000 deposit rates from over 11,000 banks and credit unions, all for free. Head to depositaccounts.com. All right, let's dive into the second piece, which, Lacey, you alluded to with your comment that this is about conversations. The second part is giving while you are alive. Can you explain what this concept's all about?
Yes. The money that you've saved, giving it to the people that you love or the people that you want to benefit from it so you can see them enjoy it while you're still alive and maybe partake in it. If in the article they're talking about going on a trip together with the family, so you are paying for that trip, but you're also getting to see your family enjoy it and have somebody to do that trip with. So I think that's really important, being able to see people enjoy the money that you intend to give them anyway. I do think, again, it goes back to balance, though, that you never know what's going to happen and, why you might need that money, or maybe a family member, for example, a divorce, maybe your child doesn't have enough money to go through with their divorce and you end up giving money to get them set back up and reset their life, or an illness. And so I think there's balance in giving the money while you're still alive, but also making sure that you can still cover down on the things that you want to be able to help with.
Oh, gee, we have bigger topics on Wednesday really to cover with Tim Semro and estate planning, but we did flirt with this a little bit. Why do you think that more people don't give away money when they're alive and they wait until death? Is it what Lacey's talking about, this fear of running out?
Well, I'm sure that's some of it, although I bet that the tide is shifting there. I was reading something from Schwab the other day, and I don't remember the exact number, so I'm going to totally screw it up, but it was something like $2 billion was donated through their donor advised fund program, or some very large amount. And I think, the barriers to some of these more quote unquote complicated giving strategies are coming down. And this is a cost structure thing. It's becoming a little bit easier to manage, a little bit less costly. So people are having accessibility. So I think it's important to, think about the future when it comes to those organizations that you care about too, because quite frankly, some of them are really bad at managing money. One of the organizations that we donate money to came out a couple of weeks ago and mentioned that somebody pretty much stole it all. They're like, yeah, sorry, somebody stole it. our bad. We just didn't have the protections in place like we should. This is a small town thing. We just, we're just all butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers. And it was, it's like $500,000 almost. And this person got caught and is going to serve some pretty substantial penalties, because of it. But the thing, like Tim was talking about on Wednesday, one of the benefits of donating money today is that you can see how it's being handled before you just go, oh, I'm totally going to give 20% of my net worth to this thing that I really care about. And then finding out that they don't have any financial controls in place. So this was a good opportunity. It was a big dollar amount for sure, but it's a good opportunity to find out, like, okay, we need to support this organization in a different way. The money certainly helps, but we also have a lot of resources, skills and talents that my wife and I can use to help create the systems around making sure this doesn't happen again, versus going, when I'm dead, you can have $2 million and I hope you do it right.
And I'm glad you brought that up, OG, because when Chris Field was on the show, he was talking about how organizations need your money, but they need your skill even more. You can throw a few $100. You can throw a few $100 in the pot, but like for us, we know more about social media. We know more about making podcasts. We've got these things that can help a nonprofit a lot, and those are thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to hire these consultants. Instead, if you do that for free, that beats the hell out of giving them $500.
Well, and then I think the other part of giving is delaying your giving, and now because of the opportunities to invest money and use things like donor advised funds for charitable intent, you still get the benefit. You still get the feel good of tax deductions and all that other sort of stuff. But you can say, look, I'm going to give you some now, but I also know that if I let this money sit here and grow, I know it's going to turn into a bunch. We started a 529 plan for one of our nieces when she was born, and we just put $50 a month into it. There were lots of months where we didn't because we didn't have the money when we were younger, and basically kind of forgot about it, just kind of on autopilot. $50 is some money. It's not a lot, but it was enough that over the course of her whole life, she's 18 now, she's like $11,000 in a 529 that didn't exist in her world until she graduated. Like literally, she's going to college, she's doing her thing. And because of this little bit that we did for a long period of time, it was a much bigger number. And so when I look at giving and the people around us and stuff like that, I would much rather support it in that manner. Or I know Doc hates this, or doing experiences, because I'm going to do it anyway. So I might as well bring some people I like with me. But notice how, by the way, Joe's never invited any of us on any of his trips. Weird. But I digress. He's like, because I would never travel with you idiots. That's why. But I would much rather support that, because I know the impact. I know, like, I can give you $50 in your, every month as cash, and that's good for you. Or I can put it in a 529 and in 20 years from now, give you 15 grand. Like, that's a huge, huge gift relative to the amount of money that I've put in. So I think it's a balancing act of both money today, but then also because of these tools, you can let your money compound and have some flexibility in the future.
Doc, Chris in this piece is his dad tried to give him some money and tried to live this idea of giving it now. And Chris said no. And he said part of it was selfless. He said, I wanted my dad to enjoy it. The other part was, I don't need your help, right? This idea that somebody's giving you something today also is a little bit difficult as a receiver sometimes, I think.
It all depends how you look at it. Part of the problem of waiting till you get older to give money is by that time your kids are older and they're probably in a pretty stable state where they don't need it. Just like Chris didn't need it right now. If he was having financial problems, he would have very much welcomed it. But it does then make you think about things like, my kid's going to college. Maybe now is the time to give him that money so he doesn't have to come out of it in debt. Or my kid just got out of school. Housing prices are really high. He's got a great job, but you know what? He doesn't have the money for the down payment for that first house. Let's get him into a house so he can continue to build wealth and yet have a place to live. So I do get this idea that there are seasons in other people's lives where they need your money more than other seasons. And sometimes giving earlier allows you to actually help them and give them the money when it can have the most impact. as opposed to at a time when maybe they're kind of stable financially already.
Well, and as long as it's not for, sorry, Joe, as long as it's not for a consumption thing, right? It's like I need to give, I'm going to give my kid some money for a car. Like, whatever, dude. Like, don't do that. But like your house example, I think you're just moving money from one pocket to the other. You're still, that money is still invested, right? If you live in a high cost living area and you're trying to buy $1 million starter house in San Francisco, and you don't have the $200K to put down, and you have extra, that $200,000 sitting in your investment account, or you can put $200,000 in equity of real estate. And there's a lot of ways to structure it so like it's still yours or whatever. Like you could get nitpicky with that, but you're not doing anything. It's just moving from one side of the balance or one part in the balance sheet to a different part. It's still an asset. It's still in equities. It's still growing, And so I think people look at it as an expense, but if you have the capital and it's purely excess, you're really just moving it to another equity investment or another thing. Starting a business, helping a kid start a business is another great example. It's like you're moving it from your S&P fund to a really, really, really tiny micro cap company, of an ice cream shop or something. So, I don't look at that as much of a gift as it is. You're just diversifying your portfolio, But still, if somebody needs transportation, if a kid needs transportation to work, like Doc was saying, there's times when they're struggling, like give them a car. I mean, you poo-pooed the car, but the car can be an investment. When I'm thinking, it's not an investment. I'm thinking about it like, don't buy your kid a brand new car. If somebody around you needs transportation, you can find a vehicle that will transport them for $10,000. That's a way different thing. Or an Uber account or whatever, right? Just say, I'm going to cover all your Uber stuff for the next year. That's probably going to be less expensive anyway. And, so you can solve that problem without, I'm thinking like, don't get your kid a new Mercedes. You know what I mean? Like that's not an investment in my kid versus spending the same amount of money on helping them buy a home, which is, you're building equity there. Lacey, I want to get to what you brought up, which is about conversations. I remember, for me accepting a gift, I remember in high school, just the gift of people giving you their thoughts, giving you their knowledge. I was a cross country runner in high school. I got done with a meet. There was a dad who knew a lot about cross country. His name was Mr. Rowley, and Mr. Rowley, my dad are standing there. Mr. Rowley goes, "Nice race." And I said, "Oh, well, the second mile, I didn't do that well. And I really felt pretty bad going up that hill. And I probably should have done this. I remember my dad giving me, that was a gift. And my dad then reminding me that was a gift as we got to the car. And he's like, when Mr. Rowley gives you a gift like that, just say thank you. Say thank you. And I felt like Chris was kind of failing that, like not accepting the fact that this didn't mean as much. It meant a lot to him, but it also meant a lot to the person giving it. There was two sides of that. How is this about conversation? This idea of gift giving during your life?
Well, it sets expectations on both sides. And I don't know how to say it politely, but I feel like this was a lot of a rich problem. Like somebody trying to give you money and you don't need it. And for most people, that's not the reality of their world. They need the money. And so they are going to accept the gift. And if you're in the position where you don't need it, it might be that, the money is given to somebody else because you don't need it. You come from a family that you have a network of people that can help you solve problems financially or whatever they are. And so giving it to somebody else that might need it. But I feel like that's a conversation to have early on is, hey, these are actually things that we could use the money for that would be helpful to us, and having a conversation about the experience. Okay, we could go on a vacation together, and where they want to go. Because some people might be like, well, that's not someplace I want to go. And you got teenagers and we're going to go and they're just going to complain the whole time. So it's just going to be a miserable experience for everybody. And so I think having a conversation about what you need and what you want in order for the person trying to give you money to be able to align that. And if you don't need it or want it, then be able to give it to something, a person or a cause that that it really truly could help somebody in their local community, somebody at their church that is, just lost a spouse or a single mom or something like that, that really could use the money or advice. I think that's also too really huge is, hey, this is how you should invest your money that's given to you, or this is how you live below your means, or whatever it is that can help move them along in life. But having the conversation, everybody just seems to be in different directions if you're not talking about it.
I do love this idea presented in at first in Die with Zero, but then Chris kind of twisted, Doc, into accepting the gift and then having this conversation that Lacey's talking about around the gift. Is alignment that a part of purpose? Because what we get at the end of this piece is Chris and his dad begin to become in alignment with dad wants to give him money. Chris doesn't want the money. They end up through serendipity. We'll just leave it at that. Through serendipity, having this wonderful conversation Lacey's talking about what might be an important gift. Does that help with purpose?
What's I think really interesting about that is we think about, and we'll see if this answers your question, but I think it's important about the conversation is we think a lot about inheritance and giving people money, but actually one of the important things we actually leave our children and grandchildren, et cetera, are our stories, our legacy, our beliefs, the things we're good at. Like all of that is legacy and impact. And I think this conversation started about money, but probably ended up being really just a deep conversation about what's important to me and what do I want to leave in this world and what do I want to pass on to you and your kids other than just here's a bunch of cash. And so I think those conversations do lead to alignment. They lead to talking about what I call generational growth. Like, what are the things I have to give to the world that hopefully will pass on to you and the kids, my stories, my beliefs, my skills, my mindset. Like, what are all these things I can pass on to you? And I think inadvertently, maybe some of that conversation started with them talking about the money, but probably really got into a deeper discussion of what's my legacy to be, right? What am I going to leave you all after I'm gone?
It's funny. I've had 2 deaths in my family in the last 2.5 years. When my brother died, there were a lot of conversations that didn't happen. And I'm still frustrated, still a little angry about my brother dying. My dad passed away recently, and he and I got to have lots of time together. And I think, Doc, you're right about the experiences, although the experiences together are the things that I'll remember. But to your point, it's not that we went to Michigan Speedway together and watched NASCAR, something we both like, or we both watched our Spartans in the NCAA tournament together and did some of these things. It was much more the fact that we were the people that could do those things together and talked. It's funny, he died not that long ago, and I already feel much more at peace about that than I do about my brother dying.
Yeah. I mean, any death is tough, right? And we go through a mourning period and a feeling of guilt and a feeling of disconnection. That mourning period tends to be easier when you feel like the person remains with you. And they tend to remain with you when you have those deeper conversations, when you have those connections where you're like, they might not be here physically, but we had that time, that moment, that connection. And yes, that does sometimes revolve around experiences, but I really think it revolves around thoughts and beliefs and ideas and connection. And that's what we want to really take. I mean, I deal with a lot of dying people, right? This is something I deal with all the time. And you want those people to live on. And the way they live on is not the experience and it's not the money. It's the connection you had with them and those beautiful things they pass on about who they were. It's their stories, it's their beliefs, it's their knowledge. It's that their grandkids do something in a certain way or say something in a certain way, and it came from their grandparent.
Assuming that you agree with that, Lacey. So if we're really talking about die with zero, does that really mean dying with 0 of these unsaid conversations left inside about getting them out?
Oh, yes. I think that you should get it all out. Money, I think you should have a little left, a little wiggle room. But yeah, the conversations, that stuff you don't want at that moment. You don't want to look back and think, I wish I would have said that. Even if it's just something kind, like, I really appreciated this one time that you helped me. A lot of people don't know the struggles that you're going through. And they could have had a positive impact and you had no idea because you never mentioned that to them. And you don't want to look back and be like, man, I wish I would have told them that, or wish I would have told them what my beliefs were or the things that I enjoyed. My grandmother is 96 and she tells stories about like her favorite Christmas and, and very excited because they all got a Milky Way. It was during the Depression. That was a really big deal, I guess, to get a candy bar. And so being able to share like how far her family has come at Christmas when everybody's opening much nicer gifts in a Milky Way, that this is something that's really important to her. So I'm all about conversations and the people that you're with. I think that's much more important than money that, can be worked out, but relationships and your family and the people that mean the most to you, and leaving nothing unsaid, again, leaving that zero, I think is important.
I was at a conference just recently and making that point about how important these were. One of the main stage speakers, we're talking about how, your parents' grandparents, somebody that they often remember very much. And if they don't remember them, at least they've heard stories about them from their parents. And you want to know about your grandparents, right? And the main stage speaker said, maybe 250 people in the room said, how many of you know the first name of one of your great grandparents? And I think there were maybe 4 people in the room that raised their hand, that knew the first name of their parents' grandparent.
Mm. Mine is great.
And we got 3. Oh, yours was great.
They all have the same name, as a matter of fact. It's so easy. It's great grandma and great grandpa.
Oh, there they are. Yeah. So know them all. Bang. Yeah. It was pretty wild though. How much of that stuff dies with people, right? How much our own heritage dies with people. All right. On that maudlin note, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up, and let's leave this on a row. Let's
on
find
that
out.
Bright note. Eventually, your great grandkids will never know your first name.
You will be erased.
And there it is. Erase. Who's a comedian that said erase? So, Doug, who is that? Erase.
I don't remember his name, but he would also say delete, delete, delete.
That's right.
Yeah.
Let's find out what all of you are doing here. By the way, I love the piece by Chris Mamula. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but I do love this piece. I love what he takes it and does with it, talking about his relationship with his dad. So again, we'll link to that. I also like Bill Perkins' book, Die with Zero, which we'll also link to our interview with Bill, just because it creates all these conversations. It has created so many conversations in this community. So whether you agree or disagree with the premise, the fact that I see so many of these conversations all the time after he wrote the book is kind of the purpose of writing the book, so we talk about what our values are. But OG, what do you got going on this weekend, this mid-August doldrums of August weekend?
Oh, no doldrums around here. Well, my wife has decided that it's a great idea for her to abandon the family and go to New York for the weekend. So,
wow, there's no passive aggressive guilt.
The nerve.
It's fantastic.
Does it sound like, Lacey, maybe there's a conversation that needs to maybe happen there?
Yes.
I'm out of here. She's like, I'm leaving on Thursday. I'm going to need you to take the kids to school. And I can find my own way to the airport. I'm like, well, that's a good thing, because I sure as hell wasn't taking you.
Because you can't handle those two things. Getting the kids to school and getting her to the airport.
And get her to the
Don't
airport.
let the door hit you.
I know. See ya.
It's your moment to shine.
Yeah.
Oh, I am the expert. So my boys have figured out that I will DoorDash anything that they want. So the last time we were home alone,
speak about being a present father right there.
The point, exactly. It's all about experiences. Remember that time when Dad got us takeout fillets from that really fancy steak place? That was so awesome.
Later on, they're writing their memoir about the reason they had to have angioplasty at 27 is because of the fact that Dad bought them fried food DoorDashed.
Oh, fillets are not fried. I mean, it's just a 10.
They're heavily buttered.
Yeah,
They're heavily buttered.
In a pool of butter.
Right. But you're not a heathen. It comes from...
That's the outside. Just eat, it's little bits around the outside. It's just a little butter. Butter's good for you.
OG is DoorDashing Del Frisco for his kids.
How did you know?
That's exactly what it was.
Did you see it on the credit card receipt again?
And billing it to the company at the same time.
Wait, what? It was a marketing meeting.
Doc G, what's going on at the Earn and Invest podcast?
So we have a rewind week, the week this is playing, but the next week on Monday, we have Matt Altmix and Joel Larsgaard from How to Money. And we're talking about the difference between lifestyle creep and intentional spending growth.
Those two reprobates.
Exactly. I like to have them on the show once a year. They're just two of my favorite guys, and they have a wonderful podcast. And it was great to have them on Earn and Invest.
You might laugh just a little bit and learn something at the same time.
Definitely.
Yes. Speaking of laughing and learning, Lacey, thanks for hanging out with us again. I think we laughed and we learned.
Yes, thanks for having me on to talk about living and leaving zero behind. It was a very, this is the toughest conversation I think I've ever had on the show.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Anything we could do, we save the good ones for you, Lacey. What's going on at the Milmo show lately?
Lots going on. I've had like a back to basics series that I just wrapped, keeping things simple from budgeting to learning about the thrift savings plan to investments. And then I'm going to have a show on rebuilding your financial wealth after therapy and marriage counseling with a accredited financial counselor. So yeah, lots of good things coming out.
That is great. And by the way, if you don't use the thrift savings plan and you're a federal employee or a military member, what are you doing? That's one of the best 401k plans in the United States.
Yes. Thank you for saying that out loud.
No, it's a great plan. Fantastic. You know what else is great? Doug's finished to this show. Doug, what should we have learned on this episode?
Well, Joe, here's what's stacked up on our to-do list based on what we learned. First, don't forget the nearly genius thing that Lacey Langford told us to do, which was this.
That you should raise fully functioning adults.
And second, OG stumbled onto a few coherent thoughts in there somewhere, not the least of which was...
when Lacey said it can go either way.
And a bonus to do coming from Doc G. What you got with us, for us, to us, Doc?
Take a lesson from Bill Perkins, but not exactly. I think you should die with zero also, just not zero money. Die with zero regrets.
Aw. But what's the biggest to do? While you're on that hedonic treadmill planning your financial future, first make sure to have a multi-millionaire grandparent who'll love you tender and leave their estate to you. It's the best way I've found to earn passive income and set yourself up for early retirement. You're welcome. Thanks to Lacey Langford for joining us today. You'll find The Milmo Show wherever you're listening to us right here. We'll also include links in our show notes at stackingbenjamins.com. Thanks to Doc G for hanging out with us today. You'll find his fabulous Earn and Invest podcast wherever you listen to finer podcasts. And thanks also to OG for joining us today. Looking for good financial planning help? Head to stackingbenjamins.com/OG for his calendar. This show is the property of SB Podcasts, LLC, copyright 2024, and is created by Saul-Sehy. You'll find out about our awesome team at stackingbenjamins.com, along with the show notes and how you can find us on YouTube and all the usual social media spots. Come say hello. Oh yeah, and before I go, not only should you not take advice from these nerds, don't take advice from people you don't know. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Before making any financial decisions, speak with a real financial advisor. I'm Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug, and we'll see you next time back here at the Stacking Benjamin Show.